Hello, I am Chuang. Let's draw the skull of Lufengosaurus. Lufengosaurus was a very primitive sauropodomorph dinosaur. Its skull displays many primitive features, and the most typical is the teeth in its mouth. Unlike later sauropods, which often possessed fewer teeth near the front of their mouth, Lufengosaurus had many teeth located very far backward, almost extended to the front of the eyes. The skull of Lufengosaurus looked a bit like a theropod's. Right ahead of its eyes are anteorbital fenestrae, which are almost level with the temporal fenestrae. Such distribution and structure are very similar to some theropod dinosaurs. The anteorbital fenestrae and the temporal fenestrae of later sauropods were often greatly deformed and misaligned. Lufengosaurus' eyes were relatively large. We can show this feature when drawing. Although Lufengosaurus rarely had sclerotic rings found in its eyes, we still speculate that this dinosaur possibly had sclerotic rings when alive. We can infer the size of its eyes based on the size of the sclerotic rings. Now, let's get started. Compose the picture first, starting with the nose tip, that is, the shape of the premaxilla. Then, draw the top of its head, which is relatively flat. The overall shape of its head looked like a square box, and its mouth was also relatively flat. We can first outline its eye socket. Lufengosaurus' eye sockets were large, and its anteorbital fenestrae were also relatively developed. The front is the nostril, and the rear is the triangular lateral temporal fenestra. We can first sketch the general shape of these bones, and then draw them in detail one by one. First, draw the lacrimal bone, followed by the postorbital bone that forms the rear part of the eyes. A downward recess is atop the postorbital. This location is the superior temporal fenestra. Across the superior temporal fenestra, we can see the frontal and parietal bones. A triangular bone is here, called the squamosal. The jugal bone forms the lower part of the eyes. The part that forms the temporal fenestra and the back of the head is called the quadrato-jugal bone. The quadrato-jugal extends downward to connect to the mandible, forming the mandibular articulation. Now, let's move to the part ahead of its eyes. At the front, we first draw its anteorbital fenestra, followed by the nostril. There is a downward concave below the nostril. The front end of the nostrils is a little undulating, not a straight line. Then, draw the top of its head. Now, let's draw the articulation of its mandible. Then, draw the seam between the premaxilla and maxilla and complete the maxilla. Next, we can draw its teeth. There are several small teeth in the premaxilla. Most teeth are located on the maxilla. This tooth at the end of the maxilla is the last one. Then, let's draw its mandible, which is narrow at the front. The line should curve downward when coming to the rear part. The rear is relatively wide. Here is the articulation, which still has a small piece protruding backward. One mandible is composed of 3 bones, with 6 bones in total on the left and right sides. The bone in the front is the dentary. A boundary divides the rear part into upper and lower parts. The upper bone is the surangular, and the lower is the angular. All teeth are on the dentary. Then, let's add the skin to this skull. We first use shading to show the muscles in the mouth. Then, draw a thin layer of skin along the outer contour of the skull. The dinosaur's face generally did not have many muscles, only with a thin skin covering atop the skull. However, very thick muscles wrapped the posterior of its mandible. So, we can show the rear part in a plump state, after this part wrapping in muscles. Then, draw its eye socket with the sclerotic ring inside. We fill the gap between the sclerotic ring and the orbit with black. The lateral temporal fenestra can be filled with black, and the superior temporal fenestra can also colored with dark color. Animals like dinosaurs are named diapsids because they have lateral and superior temporal fenestrae. The neck part can be drawn with relatively relaxed brushstrokes instead of fully coloring it into concrete black. Let's also fill the nostril and antepital fenestra black. Due to the existence of the sclerotic ring, its eyes were the middle hollow part when it was alive, so the eye sockets of dinosaurs were sometimes huge, but the exposed eyes were often small. Next, let's show the sclerotic ring. It is composed of many small bones. There are nutrient foramina on the upper and lower parts of the mouth. We can draw some traces of lips between the teeth. Finally, fill in the gaps in these bones in black. In this way, we finish drawing the skull of Lufengosaurus.